So, okay, guys, we are going to talk about everything business, the business side of dentistry. You guys spend enough money on CEs, CPDs when it comes to the clinical stuff, but today, it's all about business. It's all about how to grow your practice. And for that, we have Dr. Dan, the man, Gordon.
Okay, we gotta specify that. You might want to start over. It's Dan, the DA. Like, it's really kind of funny because I'm patient facing, and you could consider me a clinician. But all my experience was either gained from working directly with device manufacturers and through clinical experience. And it's just gotten to the point where I've experienced so much of it that people often confuse me for both.
You're not in the practicing scene as of now, are you?
Now, I
No
do
practice.
like prosthetic, like I do everything that I'm legally allowed to do under the direct supervision of either an oral surgeon, periodontist, or a general dentist.
Yeah, I had to interview you when you sent me that resume. I was like, I have to get you on a call because no
Hmm.
way, and I think the audience needs to see this. You worked as a materials expert, a sleep treatment coordinator, a digital workflow specialist, an office manager, implant coordination consultant, sorry, a mentor for general dentists. Not only this, you work with periodontists, oral and maxillofacial surgeons, restorative prosthodontists. My question is, I'm not gonna, F-bomb my own YouTube video, but how the hell do you sleep?
I work, and you can ask my girlfriend about this, or excuse me, my future fiance. Um, I work pretty much from 8 o'clock in the morning till about 11 o'clock at night. I think my personal record for taking a phone call from a survey, I think, was around 11:45, and I spoke to him about 1 o'clock in the morning. And the reason why I do that is one, I'm incredibly passionate about what I do, but at the same time, I realize that it's a numbers game, especially when it comes to dentistry and marketing, especially implant full arch. It's all a matter of how many times you get the at bat to talk to somebody. Eventually, that will end up into your chair and eventually accepting service. So you never want to turn down an opportunity to make. It's not necessarily a sale, but to make that connection.
Why did you decide to be different? Because you are, what I'm trying to ask is being good in everything better than being the best in one thing for the practice that you're working with?
I think it's important to have sort of like a growth mindset. I can't stress that enough. If I only did the bare minimum to get along to where I was, I'd be bored, honestly. If I had just stuck with being the goo and glue guy, the goo and glue guy selling bonding agent and impression material for Dentsply. I mean, I could have done that for 20 years, and retired, got a little gold watch, and had fun along the way. But at the same time, it wasn't challenging. Um, I originally started off my journey in medical device. I did trauma and transplant for 5 years, selling hard slush machines, rapid transfusers, forced air warming, things like that. So I was in the ICU, STICU, operating room, and doing in services. And that's partially where my work ethic came from, because when I was doing all these in services in the trauma base, it was usually on the weekends and it was usually at night, working with anesthesiologists, CRNAs, trauma surgeons, showing them how to operate the machine. So you're not allowed to touch the patient, but you're allowed to instruct people when they ask you questions on how to use them.
Uh-huh.
That was incredible. Well, that was incredibly stressful. And then I got into pediatrics, which was even more stressful. So my son, who was about 6 at the time, I decided I need a job where I could sleep and not have to worry about him. So a good friend of mine worked for Henry Schein. It's a large distributor rep corporation.
Yep.
And he's like, you got to check out dentistry. And Dentsply was hiring. It just so happens that I was working on a Friday for Medical Solutions, and I think on Wednesday I had a job with Dentsply. It was one of those things that happened over the weekend, so it was pretty quick. And the amount of education I got from them was absolutely fantastic. Uh, the amount of material that they gave you, it was like bringing in like everything from your first, second, and third year in dental school and combining it into about a 12-week course where you're like 2 weeks at the headquarters in Delaware, and then you're in the field for 2 weeks, getting to feel for the offices and everything else. And that went on for 3 months. So I had a pretty good background in dental anatomy, pathology, restorative procedures, crown and bridge, direct restorations, indirect restorations, intraoral, extraoral. This was before the merger with Sirona, because Dentsply and Sirona got together, and that's when the digital sort of came in. And when the digital came in, because Aquasil was the big thing back then, I decided to find something a little bit more complex and a little bit more stable, where I wasn't competing against my own company for business. And that's how I ended up with Zimmer. Zimmer is a wonderful orthopedic company. I originally applied for the spine division, and when I got the call from them to interview, they saw that I was working in dentistry, and they said, we just bought Biomet 3i. We just merged together, and we've got the Calcitech brand, and we're going to start doing dental implants, or they've been doing dental implants. It was like, how do you feel about doing that? I was like, that's fantastic, because I already had an established client base. And then the education from them was also amazing. I think the key factor, the thing that links them all together, is education. I think if you find people that are always interested in increasing their knowledge and having that open mindset that want to learn more so they can do more, the further and farther you'll go and the more profitable you'll be.
I love that. I love that. So you're not only experienced with dentistry, but is dentistry the only thing that you're doing now, though? Is it taking, the entire energy?
Well, it's interesting. I also have a farm out in Zebulon, North Carolina. I farmed for 2 years while I was working for Zimmer, but don't tell them. I'd wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I'd be in the field at 5:30. I'd work from 5:30 in the morning till about 8:30 in the morning, so 3 hours in the morning. And I'd work from 8:30 to 5:30 in the afternoon to fulfill my obligation to Zimmer. And then I'd work from 6 in the afternoon to about 9 o'clock at night. And I did that for 3 months straight. I did it for 2 years.
I
It was
thought
fun.
I thought I had a great work ethic, but whoa,
No,
you
it was a lot of fun. It was very challenging. If you've ever wanted to experience like all the trials, tribulations, and hard things in life, try farming. There's no rain. Okay, we need an irrigation system. Okay, where's the water source? I think I had about a week to become an expert in hydrodynamics to figure out, pump diameter, drip irrigation, then nutrients, and then everything else. And I was very happy the first year, bumper crop. It was fantastic. Second year, not quite so much. When they say it's feast or famine, they're not kidding.
Yeah, yeah. So you're doing all of that and more with dentistry. Let's be brutally honest. How much would it cost to be you, a mentor, the person in dentistry, the dental guy, the owner? You did mention that you have your own LLC. You have your own setup.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, how much would it cost to be you?
I don't
How?
think I could put a price tag. Like you really could not put a price tag on it. I think of myself, and I've been described as a force multiplier. And there are people like me out there. Good example. I worked for a periodontal practice, and the practitioner was, towards the end of his career. He's in his late 60s, early 70s, and just started, making small tweaks here and there, and then adding on new services, new items, different revenue streams, tightening things up, getting out of network with insurances, and just really small incremental changes and implementations of systems that over time ended up paying really big dividends. While at the same time, he was primarily focused on the clinical aspect and doing the work. I was sort of working on the back end, working to have all these things put into place.
Is it the same periodic practice that we're talking about now that you increased the revenue for? Because you did mention that you took an 800 grand a year. Was it an 800K a year
Yeah, it
practice?
was about 800 to 1.2 a year, and that's what he was averaging for the first 10 years before we got together.
Mhm.
And then afterwards, so about 1.2, the first year that he and I worked together, we did 1.8. So a good solid 150% year over year. And then 2.4 after that, and then 3.4. And I think we topped out at about 3.8. And that
How
was the last year that we did.
how did that happen? Walk us through. What exactly did you do? Because that's a lot of change for a practice that was stagnated.
It was stagnated. There was a lot of turnover and everything else. And really it was a question of just buying into it. Um, I'm extremely hardworking and I'm extremely loyal, almost to a fault. And I saw good example, 7210 surgical extraction, single tooth. We were still in network with, everybody, Delta, Blue Cross, Blue Shield, Cigna, everything else. MetLife especially. And in the States, the insurance companies, when you do a predetermination, because when you do the treatment plan, we're going to extract, we're going to do a bone graft for future implant placement, healing, collar, and covering, the whole 9 yards. And for the first part of it, you do a surgical extraction. The fee in the office at the time, I think, was $400, of which the price was negotiated down to $230. So for every extraction he did, it was 230. Even though his price was 400, the insurance was 230, and it took an hour of his time. In conjunction with the fact that the insurance companies were disallowing bone graft, the 7953 for site preservation. So in the States, it's always a big fighting with insurance companies about what they'll approve to improve long-term prognosis. Like biomaterials isn't covered, like Emdogain's not covered, Gem 21's not covered. And a lot of times you have to fight with narratives, and it's a big pain in the butt. With my previous connections working with Zimmer Biomet, there was a wonderful oral surgeon out in Arizona, and I called his office because he's out of network, and I figured, give him a call and see what he was doing. And I spoke to their insurance coordinator. And this is just a connection that I had from a previous one. I was like, how are you guys getting around it? Because I know some of your doctors are in network, and the other doctor is Dr. Boyce. He's not in network. How are you guys getting reimbursed for this? He's like, oh, we just have the patient sign an insurance waiver saying that that the insurance company doesn't recognize the value of this, and they basically have to sign away the rights to have that disallowment. So basically, we were doing 50 extractions a month, but only getting about $200 for it. That's $10,000. The second that we started to educate our patients and explain to them why they needed the bone graft so they could do the implant later, none of them have had an issue paying for the bone graft out of pocket. They just had to sign an insurance waiver. So immediately our extractions for single units went from $200 per unit to $1,100 per unit. So that basically quadrupled the production for the chair time, which is about an hour for a single unit extraction.
No, so help me understand, if we were to bottom line this, did you just go out of network for this periodontic practice, or did you just
This was the first step in going out of network. The first step was to prove that people would pay for good dentistry. It wouldn't rely entirely on insurance. So it was putting our foot into the water to test to see how things went. And of the, to the 600 to 700 extractions we did that year, I think only 2 people said no to the waiver on that and ended up paying for the bone graft, which I think at the time we were charging, $750. So basically he went from making $200 an hour to making $1,000 an hour. So our production on single unit extractions went from $10,000 a month to $50,000 a month. So that $40,000 increase just in that one procedure and in production, 40,000 over 12 months is $500,000. I think I did the math on that, right? Yeah. $480,000. So that's pretty much where the first jump occurs. And then once we realized that we didn't need to have, dental insurance, we started phasing them out one at a time. And what we did, we looked at our subscriber numbers, who we were subscribed with the least. So I think the first that was probably Cigna, then Aetna, and then Blue Cross, and then I think Delta Dental we saved till the very end. And through that process of transitioning out of network with everybody, I don't think we lost more than maybe a dozen patients.
Did you see an increase in the marketing costs of the practice? Because the trend that I've seen with private practices is, for when they were in network with all these insurance companies, that they may spend maybe 1 to 2% out of their entire unit revenue on marketing, but when they go out of network and they're only becoming slowly this cash only practice, they start spending up to 10% of their revenue on marketing to get more patients that they lost because of going out of network. Is this something you saw with this case?
It's kind of hard to say because it was an established perio practice with, a long-running hygiene program. So I already had a very large patient pool to begin with.
Mhm.
That being said, the marketing costs relative to the revenue generation were actually probably less. I do know that at one point we were probably spending anywhere between $15,000 to $20,000 a month in radio ads, internet, SEO, the whole nine yards. So it was certainly an investment in the marketing aspect of it. But as far as like an increase once we got a network, that did not occur, at least in this case. I'm not saying I can only speak to my own experiences with it, but we did not really have that issue.
So you were spending 20K on, in this case, the office was spending 20K on marketing before all of this happened and even after when you guys went
No,
out.
so I think the marketing budget probably over the tenure that I was there, because we did not most of the radio ads we focused mostly on radio ads because our patient population, I think the demographic was pretty much 55 to 75, and the vast majority of those people listen to either like AM radio or talk radio. So not only that, we also introduced a sleep program. I think the second or third year that I was there, the sleep program really took off afterwards. It required very little input from the doctor himself. So that sort of also leveraged things. In addition to that, we implemented a digital workflow that also increased productivity.
In terms of a
Yeah.
CR,
I'm sorry, could you repeat that again?
in terms of a CRM for
CRM software. I that was one of the things I was working on before I left. I think had the doctor not been so close to retirement, that we would have probably gone to a web-based, cloud-based system.
yeah.
As it so happened, we were on PracticeWorks. Nothing against CareStream. I think they make wonderful CBCT machines. They have wonderful customer support, but their PracticeWorks 4.0 is the Lotus Notes of CRM software.
Well, okay.
But
So
I'd like not everybody remembers Lotus Notes, but it's the most counterintuitive thing you will ever run across in dentistry.
how so?
Well, it has to be run on an on-site local database. Backups are tough. From an end user perspective, it's very quirky. Running reports on it was difficult. I've worked with WinOS, I've worked with EagleSoft, and a few others. And in my experience, and actually, I don't think it's one of those legacy products that CareStream is supporting until it's EOL sometime in the next, I'd say, 5 to 10 years, because everything is sort of going cloud-based.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
definitely going cloud-based in this era. But for my next, line of questions, I think this is important for the new dentists that are freshly graduating, that are still
Mhm.
new in the industry, in this niche. Dental school is, packed with information, but the one thing that they don't teach you is business. How did you learn about the business side of dentistry? Where did the business side of you come from?
A lot of it had to come down, I would say, probably to my education working with dental companies. Both Dentsply and Zimmer Biomet, they were really big on value, adding value to a dental practice. And the way that you're able to make a connection with the dentist, the best way to do it is have insight into all the problem areas that exist ahead of time, so that you can position yourself as a catalyst isn't the right word, but as an asset to the office, to basically give them little pointers or little insights or little nuggets of information that they can utilize to turn around an investment or a return on investment from that information. A really good example would be like the advent of just adding like a microscope to an office. A lot of the newer offices have very large TV screens where they can show X-rays and everything else. Also, like Pearl AI, the advent of AI, like PA and X-ray identification for cavities and everything else is really good for treatment acceptance increase. But a microscope, you can get one off eBay for $200. It's got a USB cord on it. You
Yep.
can show patients plaque samples And everybody in a periodontal practice has bacillus. Everybody has highly motile rods. Some people have amoebas. Some people have trichomoniasis. I mean, it's just one of those things where it happens. But you show that to people and they realize, the oral health is very important. And as such, they prioritize it. And whereas before you'd have people's like, oh, I don't want to do osteosurgery. I don't need scaling and root planning. It's like, I don't need this deep clean. I don't need this laser treatment. You show them because most people, especially in the non-dental world, just the average patient has a very low dental IQ is what's going on. They just know that they have teeth and they use to chew. That's it.
Yeah.
And that they're supposed to brush. They're supposed to brush twice a day. And, one of my mentors is like, why twice a day? Why not 4 times a day? Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That seems pretty reasonable. But yeah, because the bacteria, once you brush it off, it starts growing back, within 15 minutes. And it's a never-ending process. But back to your original question, where did I learn how to do the business side of things?
Yeah.
As an office manager, because I saw the P&L reports, I saw the production reports, I saw the advertising budget, I saw the payroll. I mean, being a private practice practitioner, who's a small business owner, and you are correct. And there's also a financial guru, his name's Dave Ramsey. Dentists by far are probably the worst financial people on earth when it comes to planning things out. Because most dentists, at least in the United States, when they get into it, they just want to practice dentistry. They focus on getting the reps in, perfecting their craft and everything else. And they think as long as they focus on being the best and, becoming competent at what they do, everything else is sort of going to fall into place on its own. And that's sort of like the dental bubble. And that's when they have to rely on people that they're close to and that they trust. That's why I think a lot of office managers and solo practitioner offices are either spouses or relatives.
Yes.
Yes.
So the thing that you mentioned about dentists being bad at planning things out. So I have a call center. I own a call center, and I have a team of appointment centers. And what that does for me is I get to talk to a lot of dentists per day, at least 5 on the minimum or 4 on the minimum per day. And when you're talking to all these dentists per day, you get to witness firsthand of how, they're working out their operational model for running their own practice. And you wouldn't believe how many dentists that I've talked to, they have it all wrong. They just
That
don't.
doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, yeah. And this is coming from me, someone that talks to a lot of dentists per day. I'm not talking per month, per day. At least on an average, 7 dentists per day is something I get to, the amount I get to talk to per day. And they are, and I mean, they need patience, but though they are the kind of the people, they aren't, ready to even spend $500 on marketing just to fix this one leak in their website that may, fix the entire problem that they're having with the patient flow. And they're just not ready to invest. I mean, they just, spend 300 grand on their dental school. They spend, $1 million to open their practice, or maybe let's just say 500K to open their practice. They spend 50K on a CBCT machine, but they will not invest in, getting actual patients in the practice in terms of marketing. So I would say that you're right about that part. And this is
I
something,
think,
yeah.
well, I think you're 100% correct. And also, it's very difficult because patient acquisition is the most expensive thing that you can do
Yeah.
when it comes to marketing. I think the last time I saw the numbers, it costs 7 times as much to acquire a new patient as it does to maintain a current one. So my philosophy is, especially in a periodontal practice, because when I started looking at the patients and I started noticing patterns, and then I started doing research, something like 70% of periodontal patients have bruxism, which is, grinding of the teeth. And you can see signs of bruxism: cheek biting, buccal mucosa, osteomas or tori, flat occlusal surfaces on the molars, destroyed incisal edges. So it's one of those things, like, you can train a hygienist or a dental assistant or even the front desk to look for signs of this. And then I looked online and I saw that something like 60 to 70% of people who have bruxism suffer from obstructive sleep apnea. And obstructive sleep apnea has been pretty big the last 10 years, especially in general dentistry in the United States. It's been mostly fueled by the drive that it's a medical condition, and that I think the ADA came out with guidelines about 5 years ago that if a practitioner noticed signs of obstructive sleep apnea and made no effort to educate or inform or treat, they could be held liable if anything negative happened, and it could be proved otherwise because that'd be considered negligence. So it really has been a big driving force. But then I realized, oh my gosh, 50% of our patients, and we've got 8,000 patients of record, have obstructive sleep apnea and need to be treated. And in dentistry, we're remarkably fortunate in that we have three modalities to treat it. You can do palate expansion, which falls under orthodontics. You can do appliances, which is what I'm always in favor of. You've got the OptiSleep, the Herps, everything else. And you also have laser therapy with like Photona or Solea, where you actually treat the back of the throat with either erbium chromium laser or the ND-YAG laser. And the thing of it is, lasers are a capital investment. The more you use it, the less expensive it is. Likewise, and it's a perennium because we had a Fontana, and Fontana's great, by the way, fantastic company. They're plastics and gynecology, general surgery and oral surgery, and periodontics, wonderful company. They have the night laze protocol where you actually go in and treat the back of the throat. It's 3 sessions. In North Carolina, only a doctor can do it, but in Virginia, South Carolina, Florida, and a few other states, a hygienist can actually do it. So this is a procedure that can be offloaded to support staff that doesn't have to be done by the general dentist. That's also a source of income, and it has to be repeated every 12 to 18 months. And the satisfaction rate with it is incredibly high. It's something like 85 to 90% of people, reduction in snoring, reduction in sleep, less apnea. Likewise, the protocols for making sleep appliances, like I'm a big fan of the OptiSleep. A really good speaker and mentor out here is Tarun Hargwal with 3D Dentist. He's got Raleigh Dental Arts overall. I'm actually in Wake Forest, Raleigh right now, but I split my time between here and Connecticut. He does continuing education on sleep, on full arch, on implant dentistry, guided, everything else. And just by recognizing that opportunity to work with those, 4,000 patients that are already in existence to offer them a better night's sleep, not only the things that come with that, because when you look at all the health effects of sleep apnea, whether it's increased, risk of stroke, heart attack, sudden death, daytime drowsiness, having to worry about auto accidents, irritability, cortisol levels, hormone regulation. People that have sleep apnea, their hormones are typically out of whack because they're being strangled every night. The cortisol's through the roof, especially in diabetics. Diabetics and periodontal disease sort of go hand in hand. I've had patients that have gone through sleep treatment at the practice who had A1C, like 13, 14, and then the only thing that they changed in their protocol was either to add an oral appliance, a mandibular advancement device, or do night lace therapy, and their A1C went from like 12, 11, and 12 down to like 7 and 8, which is borderline normal.
So you are a treatment coordinator. What's the one thing that actually increases case acceptance for dental practices for, let's just say, complete spile makeovers, if it's a double arch case?
I think it really does come down to patient education and sales experience. Because everybody does veneers, everybody does crowns. It's you don't have a niche product. You've got a Me Too product. You just have to sell yourself, and you also have to sell the problem more so than anything else. I received my full arch training from the Closing Institute, which is over at Progressive Marketing. They're number one.
Yeah.
Mhm. Bart's really good over there. Matt Dunn is a very good friend of mine. They've got the Closing Institute and everything else. And really, I think when it comes down is to one, the treatment coordinator has to be educated on every single facet of the procedure. So if there is a question that the patient asks and the doctor's not there, they have the answer, because you want to be able to speak from a position of authority to the patient. So that inspires confidence in them, and by indirect, establish confidence in the doctor. Currently, the workflow that I have for full arch is the marketing is done through Progressive. I've given a sales list of people to call, make initial contact, schedule an appointment, get them to come in, answer the questions over the phone, but keep it kind of vague and don't give out too much information because you don't want them to go out and do their own research, because then it gets really scary. Start looking at YouTube videos. If you type in full arch
Yep.
video on YouTube,
Uh-huh.
people are like,
Uh-huh.
yeah. But once you get them, and once you have about, I'd say about 10 to 15 seconds to make a really good impression when you meet someone. So it could be a simple thing as a firm handshake, not overly firm, but eye contact, opening a door for someone, knowing their first name when they come in, or recognizing the sound of their voice. When I work hybrid remote, but when I'm in the office, my back is sort of towards the front. But when I hear the person's voice, I recognize it from the phone call. And I always make it a point to step out because I tell everybody, I'm the giant in the back. And everybody's like, where's Dan at? I want to meet him, kind of thing. So it's one of those things where you create just like a little bit of excitement for somebody to come in. It's like, I want to meet the guy who talked me into doing this.
So
And then
it isn't the fancy stuff. It's always the little details, you'd say.
it is a little details. It can be a little bit overwhelming. Like I think there are tools. Study models are a good tool.
Yeah.
I think pre-visualization is a good tool. I think when you start throwing people, coming in, doing a CBCT and then doing a 3D face scan and then doing digital wax ups and like trying to look at our technological superiority, I think a lot gets lost. The patient, I think, ultimately wants somebody they trust that knows is going to do a good job. More so, especially in this economy, interest rates and everything else, people are always looking for the lowest price. And I cannot stress how detrimental that can be. There is good value and there is low price, and the two are not inclusive.
Yeah.
Instagram is full of pictures and videos of implants and sinuses or in nerves or, into roots of adjacent teeth and everything else. And these are people that went to dental school. And they are legally allowed to do it. And I'm not saying anything bad against GP placers. A lot of my friends are GP placers and place hundreds of implants a year. But I know that when they got out of dental school, they spent 3 years doing continuing education, doing cadaver courses, doing guided surgery before they got comfortable enough to do freehand surgery, implementing drill stops and things like that, small techniques that guarantee, positive long-term outcomes, things like that. And then you have people that are, drowning in debt and just want to do as much as they can for the lowest price. And I'm always of the mind that if you provide someone with enough education, they can see the value in a product. No, it's really hard, especially in my current setup. We're just outside of New York. We're in Connecticut. We're surrounded by doctors that are all doing full arch. A lot of them are GPs, and they're all advertising ridiculously low prices. But it's a little bit of a misnomer because it doesn't include zirconia. It's just through provision, things like that. Then they get them in. They tell them that they're going to get general anesthesia when they're not. They're going to get oral sedation. They're going to get some Novocaine, maybe some laughing gas if they're lucky. And they're going to do 4 implants. They're going to do all in 4. And don't get me wrong, all in 4 is coined by Nobel. It's a really good marketing. It makes a lot of sense. But 4 is sort of like the bare minimum. If you look at the number one dental procedure other than implant placement when it comes to all in 4, do you know what it is?
Educate me. What is it?
Implant repair.
Oh.
Like osseous surgery to repair bone loss around implants because they were placed improperly. Not only that, but people don't realize that, and this nothing against DDSs here again, but oral surgeons, periodontists, prosthodontists, after 4 years of dental school, they've done 3 years of specialty. I know that perio and the orals, maxillofacial surgeons go through 3 years of advanced training, then a year-long residency in a hospital. The guys that I'm working with right now, Dr. Jordan Greenberg and Dr. Brian Merriam, are 2 of the most talented surgeons I've ever seen in my entire life. And I've been doing this for over 15 years. And they're freehanding stuff that it looks so good in the post-operative CBCTs. Everything is symmetrical. And it just absolutely blows my mind. And not only that, but they're not doing all on 4. I think most of our cases are all on 6. We're utilizing pterygoids on virtually every maxillary case, and it's not just putting implants in for the sake of, putting implants in, but to increase the longevity, long-term prognosis and everything else. And not only that, but, avoiding cantilevers and things like that. It's a better clinical outcome for the patient. And they can also get, premolar occlusion or, even getting 14 on the top, 14 on the bottom. You know, you can do that with pterygoids. You can't do that with all on four.
What,
And people don't realize that.
yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Well,
So,
no, the patient's like, oh, I want. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
The patients want teeth. The patients want teeth in a day, but like, oh, I can go down the street for 19.95 because the national average is $25,000 per arch in the United States. Overseas, it's less, but the major players like Clear Choice and Nuvia, you know, they're charging people $65,000, $75,000 for full mouth reconstruction if it's complicated. You know, at our office, you know, we're usually somewhere between like 20 to 24 for a single and 40 to 44 for a double. We've had patients that were quoted $75,000 at Clear Choice. They needed a double, not a quad, just a double zygomatic pterygoid and two nasal implants, and they were quoted $75,000 for it. We did the exact same treatment plan for 44. We saved that patient $31,000 and a lifetime of debt, providing the exact same service under general anesthesia. I would argue that is an amazing value.
Yeah, yeah.
But Clear Choice spends millions and millions of dollars on TV advertising. I took a trip to New York with my missus to catch a Broadway show. She loves Broadway. And I think we were watching Death Becomes Her at Sunset Boulevard, and we were in the hotel room. I turned on the TV, and I never watch TV. But when I was in the hotel room, I clicked through the channels, and in 5 minutes, I saw like 7 different doctors all talking about teeth in a day, all on four, neo-arch, you name it, wellness hour. So it's a really, I think that's really where dentistry is going, because people are all about immediacy. They want to see results. They want to see dramatic results very quickly. Combined with like the aging population and everything else, I think that that's sort of where everything is going to eventually end up.
Wouldn't you say, keeping all that in mind, wouldn't you say that at the end of the day, for patients, it's all about the price? Especially when, it's, if it's a zygomatic case, if it's something that it's going to cost, patients a lot of money, no matter. So you gotta get patients in through the front door, and only then,
Correct.
you know, try that fancy sales stuff, and remembering the little details about them, and the training from Progressive Dental. You can only try all of that when you actually throw in some crazy new patient specials for all on four cases, for complete smile makeovers, and actually make it enticing for patients to actually approach you in the first place.
Mhm.
So it's not all, I would say, education, I would argue.
No, that's fair. That's entirely fair. I think that, and here again, there are different philosophies. And one of the things, one of the sales techniques that I was taught when I was at Dentsply is the challenger sale. Usually it's more implicative to, or more applicable to businesses, where you provide them with a lot of information, provide them with that insight, know their business better than they do, provide the insight. And then there's something called rational drowning, where you give them so much information, it sort of causes like an overload. And then
Yes.
you throw them a life, and then you throw them a lifeline. You sell the problem, and then you throw them the lifeline with the solution, and they thank you for it. I have made the mistake of talking too much, and I've definitely talked myself out of cases. I'll be the first to admit it. I'm not perfect, I think. And my doctors are great. Dr. Merriam was be the first one coming. He's like, "Why are you talking about proprioception to a patient?" I was just like, they asked how they would feel. I was like, try to explain that to, like, proprioception is something like you learn in like your second or third year. You can't really explain to somebody off the street. So it's just one of those things. But at the same time, ultimately it comes down to, I think, for a patient accepting treatment is trusting the practitioner. And the only way that trust is built, they have to have confidence in the practice. And that starts when the door opens and you're greeted. It's not one particular thing. It's a multitude of things all adding up for the stars to align for them to say yes. The practice has to be clean. The door has to be wiped down. I mean, these are just like small things. Hold on one second. App pop up. These are
Mhm.
just small things. Hold on one second. That all add up to big things. So the appearance of the office is a big one. Dr. Sonic, he's a big practitioner in Connecticut, and his thing is cleanliness, and hospitality is a big thing. See, I'm from North Carolina, so I'm very hospitable. Sometimes it doesn't play very well in Connecticut because it's Connecticut and so close to New York. People are always like very busy. They want results now. They really don't have time for small talk. At the same time, the practice is very busy. We're sometimes seeing anywhere between 4 to 10 consults a day for full arch. So it's very important to sort of like keep the ball rolling. And then it just becomes sort of a numbers game. The more you see, the more opportunities you're going to have to close. And I think the most of the people that come in is either out of curiosity, and then everybody wants to know what the number is because the numbers are all over the place. Is it 10? Is it 15? Can I go to Vegas? Should I go to Turkey? I can get it done in Tijuana for $5,500. I was like, yeah, if you get it done, if there's any problems, nobody's going to want to touch it. You're going to have to fly back down to Tijuana for them to fix it, kind of deal. And it's here again, if the price is right, they trust the doctor, they like to practice, and they like you, and they're able to fit it into the budget. And I would say about 90 to 95% of people that accept treatment, especially on big cases over $20,000, I can count on both hands this year the number of people have pulled out a checkbook and written a check for 40 grand.
Whoa. Okay.
Well, that's on two hands, and that's seeing hundreds of people. The vast majority will do Proceed, Care Credit, Cherry, or Lending Club. And it's unsecured loan, so the interest rates are 3.9. And here again, there are people that, there's hardship retirements from 401ks. If there's a will, there's a way to do it. I had one guy sell a motorcycle and a Corvette that he said he'd never sell to do this. I had someone do a home equity agreement, which I didn't even know existed until this year, which is really interesting. It's basically pre-selling the equity in your house for a lump sum of cash that you don't make payments on. But when you sell the house or you die, they get the equity, which is wild, but at the same time, kind of makes sense. Home equity loans is revolving lines of credit. If people want to get this done, if the pain is big enough, people will find a way to finance it. And the question is, like, are you going to have that trust? Because it is a lot. It's more than a year's college tuition in most places. It's as much as a new car. But when you think about it, a new car only lasts like 5 to 8 years, and you got to get another one. With this, you've got 20 to 25, 30 years out of this.
Yeah.
And you might drive your car maybe 30 minutes a day. You're going to be with your teeth 24/7, 365 until you die. So it's one of those things.
But educating the patient aside, and actual case presentation, skills aside, can a dentist actually, get more patients in the office with skills alone, with a reputation alone?
Yes, but with the caveat of time.
How so?
To get the patient, if you are an awesome dentist, okay, and you do a fantastic job, and that patient leaves your office happy as a clam, on average, they might tell one or two people, hey, I saw Dr. Smith, he did a bang up job, it's fantastic. You have one bad patient where you don't do the nerve block correctly, you need to go in for a second local, they're telling 7 or 8 people Dr. Smith is like a quack and he can't do anything. Now, if you're excellent and make no mistakes and, you're on your A game and you create word of mouth, eventually, with time, you will build up a reputation. And with that, you can get people in. But that's something that takes decades to happen. Without proper marketing, without SEO, without online presence, I would imagine that would be incredibly difficult to do because you'd have to keep your doors open while you did it. So, and as much as I love to think that I worked with some really great doctors, I know for all the really great ones out there, there's a lot of, mediocre ones. And that mediocre is not the right word. There are some doctors that are absolute rock stars that, they do the TikTok, they do the Instagram, they do the marketing and Google reviews. I think you've never had a time in the industry where more people have had access to information about how you perform than right now. With the number one thing probably being Google reviews. I cannot tell you how many people have come into an office because I read a Google review, because they trust strangers more than they trust, people that they know. That's the other thing. Google reviews are very difficult to get. When I was working at the periodontal practice, when I started at the very beginning, we had 62 Google reviews, and they've been in business for 25 years.
Oh.
And then, the smart cards that have the QR codes on them, so you can just hold up your phone. We implemented that and then put a bounty on people who get Google reviews for us. It was a $10 bounty. It wasn't bad.
Oh.
But all of a sudden we were getting, 20 Google reviews a week. And I think we went from 60 some Google reviews to over 500 in less than a year and a half.
Just with the QR thing alone, just with the bounty?
Yep.
Whoa.
Well, the vast majority was either done by somebody like myself or for the front desk staff that were trained. And here again, they were incentivized as well. Because do you remember I talked in the beginning about the growth mindset?
Yes.
It's really important that when you're working with people, and this is especially true of small offices, I think the best dental offices that are run like professional sports teams. If a dentist ever tells you that, we're like a family here, they expect you, no, like that is the biggest red flag. Just start putting your resume out, because I am not here to be family. I am here to make a living, and I'm here to make an impact.
Yep.
I'm here to serve, and I want my life to have meaning. It's like, don't get me wrong, you can have your boat and everything else, but at the end of the day, that I want to work with people that are likewise motivated. And typically speaking, that also sort of falls into the level of the question you asked: how much would it cost to replace me? I think it's very important to go where you're valued. And that's the same thing with office staff. You know, the insurance coordinator I work with now, and I've worked with insurance coordinators in the past, they love helping. Nobody loves being on the phone with an insurance company. It's like, I don't know, it's horrible. It's like having a root canal every day. No pun intended, but when you have someone who's motivated to help people and whose purpose is to do that, and they acquire joy when they do it, that's an awesome person to have on your team. Likewise, when you have like a treatment coordinator that loves to change lives, I cannot tell you, since I've been working with this group that I've been working with, doing the full arch, the full mouth reconstructions, I've had grown men, really large dudes, big as me, cry on my shoulders. I've had people who never had confidence to speak to a girl in their life go on a date for the first time in like 20 years.
Mhm.
There was a girl who hadn't smiled in years, who was able to get a job and move out on her own. There's going to be kids that are going to be in this world because I played a very small part in helping them get to where they want to be. And I love what I do, and I love the people I work with. It's really important. At the same time, the way that the office is managed, everybody does what they're supposed to do, and they realize all the values. Back to your point with marketing, our marketing budget is tens of thousands of dollars. I don't want to give out the exact amount, but it's a lot.
Mhm.
At the same time, the return on investment is like 8 to 1, 9 to 1. Even when you take materials time, chair time, and everything else, it's still a pretty good way to run a business. So I'm sorry, I went off on a little bit of a diatribe.
No, you're good. But talking about TikTok, is dancing for TikTok a good way to get more patients?
I think if you're a pediatric patient practice, it might be a good idea. Because, and see,
Yes.
I'm old. I'm old. I'm 44 years young. But I ride motorcycles. That like makes me 34. I would say for pediatric practices and dentists that are just starting out, what's really kind of crazy, there are a lot of dentists that are out that are like 27, 28, 29 years old. They are the TikTok generation. That is their platform. And that's where they're pulling their patients from. It all depends on what you want to do. I think the high revenues, like the prosthodontists, the oral surgeons, there's not a whole lot of TikTok content you can do for like, wisdom tooth extraction, but at the same time or root canals, because there's nothing really fun or exciting about it.
Yep.
Implants, I think there's a lot to be said because of the reveals, showing people what they look like, the emotional aspect to it. Especially I've seen the ones on TikTok where they have the snap indentures and it's like makeup, and it's like before and after is like, that's really, really, that's advertising. It's incredible. And it does drive engagement, but does it drive, seats to the chair? It's debatable. I think Instagram and Facebook is where the vast majority of the population that needs dental services is going to be located. Those are going to be your 35 to 65-year-olds.
But wouldn't you say that the distribution, the way the algorithm is set up with Instagram or with Facebook or with TikTok, the way the algorithm is set up is it distributes the content nationwide. And you,
Mhm.
as a dentist, you are landlocked in a very specific location because you have an office. And given that the distribution of the content is nationwide, you can't really pull in patients from the West Coast if you are on the East Coast.
unless you're a center that specializes, or there are some full arch places like in Costa Rica or in Vegas that are a destination. I mean, I'm on the East Coast and I get ads all the time for, full arch out in Vegas or full arch out in Dallas and everything else. And they do offer competitive pricing and everything else, but most of the time it's because they're only going to temporization and PMMAs, and they sort of sell it as a package experience. But more to your point, with TikTok being global and the vast majority of dentists being landlocked, I don't think that's a good use of time. I'd love to be proven wrong by it, but I'll give you a good example. I've been just posting content on Instagram for, I don't know, just a few months, maybe like 7 months, and I'm getting somewhere between 50 to 20,000 views on my Instagram, which is very small, per month. And it's doctors and patients. It's also a really good tool because patients always want to see what you do, especially in offices. We don't have currently where I'm working, we do not have a social media manager. None of that's all the advertising is done on either Instagram or Meta or Google. But as far as like curating an Instagram page where there's content being filmed with doctors dancing or patient reactions, we really don't have that. I think that's something that in the future we'll dive into a little bit more. It's just a question of priorities and time. Like right now, everything that we're doing, could it be done better? Absolutely. So I'm just making note of this. Actually, I think that's something we should bring up. And that's another thing, just keeping track of everything. I think the biggest lie that I was ever told in dentistry was we don't have time for that. When it's just everybody's got time. It's just a question of prioritizing it.
Yep.
I was a Zimmer rep for a long time, for 5 years. So I learned a lot about implant dentistry, prosthetic connections, physiology, and all that. And when I left Zimmer, guided surgery was just getting like really big, especially fully guided surgery. And when I brought up, because we used Nobel at my previous office, and they bought DTX Studio, the rep showed me this is really good. Even though the doctor I had been working for had been placing implants for 25 years, since 1986, he placed some of the first implants in North Carolina. Yeah. And the Brennemark baskets still look fantastic to this day, by the way. Every now and then, there's in 24, 25, 26, we're like, it looks really close to the adjacent periodontal ligament, where you see the x-ray and you're just like, that's close. That's not our problem. That's a restorative dentist problem to fix that. But there were a couple cases that we started turning away that were too close, because you have to have a millimeter to the facial, about 1.5 millimeters to the lingual, 1.5 millimeters to the next implant. There's all these spacing rules and regulations and recommendations when it comes to implants, and you really had to be like William Tell or Robin Hood to hit it. And we started doing implant pilot guides, and I was using DTX Studio, and they were charging, I think, $100 for every, it was $159 for one pilot guide. And I was like, that's kind of expensive. And then I started looking into it. It's like, well, we don't have time to do this. Like, well, I mean, we're going to turn that case away if we didn't do it guided. So it was like, so there is value in that. So we started looking at it. It's like, well, we don't have time. So I did it on my own time. So I got off work at 5 o'clock, and I spent, I don't know, probably about from 6 o'clock at night to about 10 to 11 o'clock at night for 2 weeks, just going over YouTube videos, tutorials, and everything else. And DTX Studio is not ExoCAD. I just want to point that out.
Yeah.
But I learned DTX Studio. I learned DTX Studio in about 2 weeks. And we had time for it. And then we started doing more surgical cases. Not only that, the restorative doctors, after about 3 to 6 months, started noticing, wow, we're not having to make a whole lot of custom abutments because the spacing is perfect for a stock abutment. That's going to save us some money. Likewise, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Encode, but it's basically a healing abutment that is also a scan body. We started providing vouchers for abutments. So restorative doctors would have lab restorative fees. Instead of being $700, we're like $200, making them more money and not costing us a whole lot in return. It's a part of the digital workflow that Zimmer has, or 3i has, that's sort of been picked up by Zimmer. By Horizons also has something very similar with their anatomical scannable abutments. Anyway, I digress. But the quality of the placement went up. The general restorative dentist noticed this, and then we started getting more referrals for implant placement and extractions from them. So while it was a small investment of time, it was 20 hours on my part, ended
Yeah.
up paying off massive dividends on the doctor's part with very little input. And he didn't need to know where it came from. He just needed to know that it worked.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And just a few more questions. Dan, why do you think that practice owners can and this is actually a question for myself because I am in marketing and I think even now I cannot, tap into the brain of a practice owner. They will, drop $1 million on opening their own practice, maybe 500K, spending all this money on, machines, scanners. Even a CBCT machine is costing you on an average 50K. What they're spending all this money. Why do you think they're not spending money on marketing? Because they always hesitate when it comes to marketing.
It, I think to them, it's sort of like vaporware or it's an intangible. Like you walk by that CBCT machine every day, you come to the office, but if there's no patients using it, it's a $50,000 paperweight.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
capital equipment is all the same. Capital equipment is a upfront investment. The more you use it, the cheaper it is. I'll give you a good example. The periodontal office that I was working with prior, one of the things we did, one of his value adds before I came on, he wasn't charging for the CBCTs. He was doing the CBCTs at no charge. And then if you got the implant, it was sort of like included in the thing. So it was a free CBCT. Well, if you look at, there's a wonderful app. It's called FH Cost Lookup. It shows you what people charge in your area code at like 50%, 75, and 95%. And a CBCT on average in the state of North Carolina is like between $250 and $300. And we were doing, between 3 and 6 a day. So that's, $2,000, anywhere between $1,000 to $2,000 a day that we weren't making because people would get the CBCTs and it's like, okay, well, they had no buy-in. It was free. Okay, I'm missing a tooth. I know that I have a bone, but I'm just going to wait and see. And that's another problem because they're not educated. They don't know about, passive eruption, active eruption. They don't know that if they don't, fill the space and time, the antagonist is going to drop down. They don't know that the crowding is going to happen. It's like a slow moving game of dominoes. So when it comes to advertising, the value is only the capital equipment. It's instant. You buy the machine, it's in the corner, you get to use it. Yes. The same thing with advertising. There's a ramp up. It's called a pipeline for a reason. It's called a funnel for a reason.
Yep.
Our funnel is huge. I mean, in the past 6 months, I've had 1,200 leads come through. That's my funnel. Everybody gets thrown into the funnel. Out of that 1,200, I maybe have 400 that have 600 or above credit scores. So automatically that A go down. So it just, as it goes down the pipeline, it decreases. And then of that, the ones that actually need the service versus people who just want veneers, it drops down to maybe 200. And of that 200, maybe I can get 100 in the office. And of that 100 in the office, maybe I can sell 50 of them.
Yeah.
So I had to make 1,200. I had to generate 1,200 leads to get 50 patients in the door. Once they're there, I'll tell you just the numbers alone. 75% of them are double arches. So that's a $40,000 to $50,000 case. So 25 cases at $50,000, 1.5.
That's
1.2.
Yeah.
I'm really bad at math, but it's a lot. So here again is like, I'm going to spend, $20,000, $30,000 a month on marketing, and my return on investment is going to be over $1 million. That's a really good investment.
Yep.
But at the same time, you got to realize that it's not instantaneous, and it's not. You can't go from advertising to money. There are so many different steps in between, and I think that's where the disconnect is. I think that they don't see because you have to do the intake. You have to have the front desk, sort everything out. So you need to get the treatment coordinator to meet with them. You've got to get the x-rays. You've got to get the CBCTs. You got to get the patient education. The oral surgeon or the dentist gets maybe 15 minutes to answer any questions, to speak from a position of authority. And then it's left in the hands of the treatment coordinator to secure the treatment. And then for the financial coordinator to get the finances squared away. And ultimately to coordinate everything with the anesthesiologist to get a surgery date. And even once you get a surgery date, it's not the end of things, because you have to get the physical, you have to get the anesthesia, the patient consents, the lab workups. I mean, it's a pipeline. The whole thing, from start to finish, in a perfect world, it could probably be done in about 10 days. But from lead generation to money in the bank, a month, 2 months. So if you say, hey, I'm going to give you 20 grand this month and 20 grand next month, but you're not going to see any returns until month number 3 or 90 days out, for a lot of people, that's very difficult. And I imagine in your line of work, you see that a lot.